Steven.
Joseph.
What's up?
Welcome back. Another podcast episode. It's been a little while.
Couple weeks since
Couple weeks.
Berm.
Lots has happened in a couple weeks out there.
Yeah, it's a whole different market. It's a whole different market. It's all we're talking about around the office right now.
It seems like it's kind of all anyone's talking about right now. It seems to be the hot topic again. I mean, we can talk about these topics. I mean, we have touched on these topics, interest rates and things in past podcasts, but I think it's relevant for us to get into it a little bit again and kind of maybe give some opinions that we have and other opinions that we've heard, and talk about how,
because we don't know. The true answer is
we don't know, but we can also talk about how we do see this in this season a lot
every year,
right?
Yeah.
So I think it's relevant for us to touch on it at least a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have my laptop open a lot today because I want to bring up some stats and things to try and make sense of what's going on in the market. And I'm gonna pull up an old podcast, not today, but I'll maybe share it into this podcast as well. This right now, the market is seeing a softening, and there's a lot of articles coming out in the newspaper or on the news or social media just talking about how the market's going to crash or things are dropping because interest rates are rising, inflation, and everything going on. There is a softening happening. We definitely are feeling it, but that's also called spring. Like, it's just a lot more houses are hitting the market. Buyers have a lot of options. Yes, there are some buyers that are nervous about the rising interest rates because their affordability is changing. But the market typically will climatize to that. We're still at almost record low interest rates. Like, the interest rates that we're going up to are still historically very, very low.
I read so variable rates still today are somewhere around 2.3-ish%.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're at a 2.3% mortgage, I mean, you're still doing a pretty damn good job of having a low interest rate.
Yeah.
Because historically we see over years and years around a 5 or 6% interest rate, right? So
the one thing that is good about this is for the buyers, these articles are causing people to want to finally put their houses on market and get them sold because they think that the market's going to change, and they could. It also is allowing a lot of the buyers to step back and maybe not want to invest as much and buy those second or third properties, which is allowing first-time buyers, second-time buyers to finally have options again. So we're coming more back into like a little bit balanced market. I still think it's in favor of the sellers, but we're seeing options being more available and ready for buyers. And I think that's going to continue most likely from now into the fall. This is what the buyers have needed. But the funny thing is, where are all the buyers? It's like they're getting fearful of all the articles and things they're seeing, and everybody's been waiting for a softening. We finally get a softening, and there's no buyers to be found. I'm like, this is the time. There's going to be months from now or a year from now, we're going to look back and be like, we should have bought then. I mean, Windsor's got so much coming to it. I think the buyers need to open their minds to possibly realizing that right now may be a good time in the long term.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to remember that over time, your investment's going to go up in real estate. There have been dips and valleys in the past. We've seen huge interest rates in the 80s, right? People remember, like, in the teens and even into the low 20s, which is crazy, and I really truly don't think we'll ever see that again, because the Bank of Canada understands that by doing that it would literally just destroy what economy we have, right? So there was a dip there, and then obviously there was a dip in parts of the 90s, and then there was a little dip, and I say little, around 2008 and 2009, because it didn't last very long. If you look at the historical average sale price values in those times, they dropped by, maybe 10-15%. And then within a year and a half, they were back up again to where they were. So, dips do happen, but real estate historically is always an appreciating asset. And I think whenever somebody has tried to time the market, whenever you've really tried to time when you buy and when you sell to try to maximize, I think most people.
Well, it's any market, real estate, stocks,
Right.
anything. You should never try and time the market. You deal with the hand you're dealt at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're somebody who's looking to do a quick flip, maybe right now is not the time for the next 3 to 6 months. But if you're looking to buy a home, as long as you don't plan on selling during any of these soft times, you're fine in the long term. I mean, we have a $5 billion EV factory coming, and we'll talk about that. We have feeder plants that are being announced. We have other big announcements that I believe are coming. Windsor, I don't even think we've scratched the surface of what Windsor's about to do.
Well, and that's what I like to always touch on too, is when you read these articles, these are usually national articles. These are things that are written about places like Toronto and Vancouver and these really metropolitan centers, and these places are already double the value or triple the value of Windsor. So we're in this huge growth period here in Windsor, and we're, like you're saying, we're seeing these, plants go up and the bridge being built and the hospital being built. And maybe. I think, even with rising interest rates and some fear factor entering the market, I still think Windsor's going to continue on a growth pattern. In fact, I know we're not going to continue to see, 25% year over year increases, but we don't want that. Mm-hmm. Ideally, we want to go back to the historical, maybe 5 to 8% per year increases in the market that are more realistic. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I don't think their plan was to ever stay at these low interest rates. These low interest rates stuck around for quite a while, and obviously were some of the reason we've seen this big increase in market and average sale prices. But I think this is the right thing that has to happen for buyers' sake. I would love to see a more balanced market, but to think that this market is going to crash or drop, and if it did for long, I just don't see it. I'm not saying it can't go down. I actually predict the next few months probably will see a small decrease in average sale price. But to see an absolute tank out of the market or some long recession, Southwestern Ontario is a very high population of Canadians population.
It's a desirable place to live.
We have,
and that's what matters in this kind of a market.
Incredible investments coming to this city. Mm-hmm. Very low supply, immigration still coming in at record paces. I just don't see how, in a supply and demand level, that this will sustain what people think is going to be this long recession that's coming. I actually think the opposite. I think Windsor's going to continue to see an increase year over year in the long term. Mm-hmm. Now, the next 12 months, I think, or at least the next 6 months, we'll probably see it fairly tame. Just people got their freedoms back. They want to go on vacation.
Yeah.
Coming out of a pandemic. The interest rate rising, all these things that are happening, I understand why it's softening. It makes sense. And things are still selling. They're actually still selling well, but these articles are definitely fear-mongering people into not buying when they're going to look back and probably see that this is the time to buy. I'm going to use an example. I'll share my screen on this one. If I go to Windsor 2020, average sale price by month. Actually, the price didn't even drop much, but I'll go to action as far as number of sales. So if I go to number of sales, you'll see in April of 2020, we hit a pandemic. Everybody didn't know how to take it. Nobody knew what to do. There were a lot of articles about the market was changing. So everybody freaked out and sales completely tanked for April. Not anywhere close to what it would have normally been in a spring market. And then shortly after, May came back, June came back, and we had a booming summer. I expect this year will be a little similar. I think this initial announcement of the rising interest rates, the highest increase in 22 years of 0.5, I expect there's going to be a little bit of a softening and some fear in buyers, and then I think it's going to pick back up. And buyers are going to look back at April and May as maybe an opportunity they should have jumped on. And we've seen it before back in 2020. And I'll share my screen, or I'll share this this graph in the video.
Yeah, I mean, we can only do our best to sort of predict what's going to happen, right? You know, we can talk to death about it, and we can be surprised just like everybody else. But I think one of the things that we constantly come back to every spring, every January, February going into the spring is it's the same rhetoric that we hear. We get these articles that come out that say, you know, the market's going to crash, or the market's going to correct itself, or, you know, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And that initial fear or that initial hesitancy that people show tends to wear off going into later spring and into the summer again. I don't think we are in a position right now for at least Windsor real estate to take this big nosedive.
Well, it just doesn't make sense. You can't have investments and jobs coming into a city and see a recession. How do you have a major border crossing, the biggest border crossing in North America being built, all the jobs that's going to bring in, all the jobs that has, you have a $5 billion investment, the biggest investment, I believe, in Windsor history. Mm-hmm. It's the only EV plant. It's the first of its kind for Canada. It's bordering the U.S. So obviously where we're located geographically with the major border city and having the EV plants, that's building an infrastructure that's going to significantly grow from there. We already have another $1 billion investment coming for a feeder plant. Chatham just got another feeder plant announcement. And then there's some other big announcements that I'm not going to speak of yet that we believe that are coming. You can't just have this many jobs and these many investments coming into a city and expect a recession, especially when we're significantly still below national average and provincial average. There's too much room to grow, and we have so much space and land. We're just begging for investments. We're begging for... The Windsor that everybody's used to and what everyone's thinking is a Windsor of the past.
Right.
Everybody's got their mindset on Windsor 10, 20 years ago. Right. I understand that this city is not known for having investments and a lot of infrastructure coming in, but it's changing. And it's changing quite quickly. I'm going to share my screen again. This is out of Vancouver. But this at least shows you a trend in real estate. It doesn't matter where it's from. It could be Seattle. I don't give a shit. This is a trend in real estate and showing how real estate continues to grow year over year since 1977. So similar to Canadian real estate, there's dips and valleys and it continues to grow over time. So you'll see in 2007, 8, 9, the drop only lasted 2 years. Mm-hmm. From when it started to drop to when it got back to where it was. It only took a 2-year time. And that was like absolute record breaking for Canadian history, especially the US economy. This was a global issue. So you continue to go up here, you'll see it kind of bounced back and forth until this huge spike that we saw over the last 5 years. And then you see that quick drop that we had. This is what Vancouver had in 2016-17. We were talking about this the other day because this is Vancouver's. Vancouver and Toronto saw a dip, remember, back in 2016-17, and Windsor continued to grow. And this actually goes into what you were just saying. We can't take articles that are based on the larger cities as something that's going to happen here, because in 2016-17, Windsor saw significant growth when other cities like Toronto and Vancouver actually saw a big dip. But even then, let's go to their dip that they had. That dip that they had only took 1 year to get right back to where it was. So if we see a dip again, historically, they jump back right away because investors jump in, people buy up properties for cheap. The Bank of Canada usually steps in to give some sort of relief, whether it's interest rates or whatever, incentives.
I think what we're going to see if you look at that graph is look at back through the 80s, look back through the 90s,
Yeah.
the early 2000s. Look at the slow growth on
Yeah.
that graph. You
Yeah.
know, it goes up, it goes down a little bit, it goes up, but over time that graph is on an upward trend.
Yeah.
And that means real estate values are increasing probably in that
I think it grows
5% per year.
It's
on
somewhere
average,
around
sort of
four.
thing,
I think
right?
I added it up. At least Ontario, I believe, was a 4% average year over year.
So I mean, again, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't, forecast exactly what's going to happen out there. But we have indicators, and we have past experience to draw from, and we have a lot of knowledge in this industry to be able to predict and tell people sort of what to expect, at least in the near future. So
I'm gonna try and find one here.
yeah.
I want to try and find one from. Okay. I mean, this actually isn't a bad graph. Was this? I lost it. Whatever.
That's Wikipedia for you.
This one. What does this one even say? Oh, annual CO2.
I don't think we need to worry about the CO2.
This is a good graph. This is a good graph.
Yeah.
Why does
we
it?
could switch? We could switch gears a little bit and,
Yeah.
and just touch base on the other big thing that maybe even a lot of people haven't heard about yet. But I think the Canadian Real Estate Association is doing a pilot project that is going to sort of work on changing the way that bids are submitted in these situations where we've got multiple offers coming in on properties. And I know a lot of people's bones of contention in this is the blind bidding process, and I think a lot of that comes along with misconception as to sort of what benefit they would get if this blind bidding were to go away. And I'm definitely not afraid to speak my mind on what I think are the implications of getting rid of blind bidding, and what the implications are when and what people can expect when they go into a situation where they can see everybody else's bids, and all of a sudden you've got sort of almost an auction style process. I don't know. My 2 cents. And we talked about this over the last few years because this has been something in the air for a while. But listen, if you're a first-time home buyer and you're not in the market yet, and you think that blind bidding is hurting you, listen to what I say here, because it's a level playing field in my opinion when there's blind bidding, in the sense that you as a first-time home buyer with maybe only 5% down, you don't have deep pockets. You don't have a ton of money to spend. You've got a cap to what you can spend. You have to stay below that because you can't afford anymore. But
and we have great success with our buyers.
Absolutely.
Because of
the playing field is leveled in the sense that even the investor that is interested in that property that you're bidding on has no idea what other people are bidding. So they have to do their research and figure out, okay, what's the market value on this house? How much am I willing to spend on this house?
Yep.
And then they have to take their shot at it just like you have
Yep.
to take your shot at it.
Yep.
If we get into a situation where every bid is public and you can put your bid in and you can see it in real time and where you're ranking and how much lower you are than other people, you, with your 5% down and your ambition trying to get into the market, are not going to be able to beat or match
somebody with deeper
an investor
pockets.
with deeper pockets than you that can say, I'll just wait until it slows down and then I'll just pop an extra $1,000 on top of you every single time until you can't afford anymore.
I know for Windsor, this open bidding would be, I think would be an issue just because there are people coming from other cities with deeper pockets, and the first-time home buyer that's maxed at 4 is going to get beat by 401, 402 every single time because they just can't go any higher based on their approval amount. With the blind bidding, homework has to be done by the agents and the buyers. And I understand there's people coming in from other cities that have no idea how the sales numbers, and they're coming in and they're not doing homework. They're just slapping down prices.
Right.
And you hear of these crazy prices that are going. All this means is for out-of-town buyers that aren't doing proper homework, if instead of going 80,000 over the second person in the second placed offer, they can see, oh, I don't need to go 80 over. I'll just go 5 over. And if they try and beat me, I'll go 5 over again, and because I have all this room. It's actually just going to make it easier for them, I think. Now, I think that's been our biggest issue. With the blind bidding, you have people that are uneducated. They come in and they just make up a number based on their knowledge of the city that they're from, not realizing that that number is a lot higher in Windsor terms, right?
I would also argue that that's not like the norm. Like it's not like
that happens on every house.
Houses that every single time we're seeing some Toronto or some out of town buyer come in and blow everybody out of the water by $100,000.
But those are the stories everybody hears.
Yeah, those are the stories that everyone hears about when they happen here and there. But you know, I would say on the majority of our listings that we see, it's not like we're getting blown away every time by some one offer that's
most of them are actually usually very respectful. Like there's always a range. Like we predict that it's going to come in around this range. Us as the selling agents will see, you know, majority offers come in and around that range, and there usually is that one or two that push it because they want it for whatever reason. There's a motivation, a subjective value. But on open bidding, I feel like emotions are going to come in high. People are going to be like, they're going to forget. Like they're going to forget that homework even exists or what houses are worth, because they're just going to say, well, if somebody's willing to pay 402, then I'm going to 403 because I know somebody was willing to pay 402. And then somebody says, well, I'll go to 405. And it's just going to keep going and going and going and going and going and going. There used to
be something that you would see in offers all the time called an escalation clause.
Right.
And it was essentially that just in the offer in your schedule at the end of your offer, right? Your conditions.
And it didn't catch on. Everybody shut it down.
Right, because the issue there was one of privacy. And I don't really know how they're skirting around this, but you're not supposed to know what the other offers are legally, right? And there's a range of reasons for that. I mean, to know somebody's financial position or to know what somebody's maximum value is. Because think about this, say you're competing against somebody and you end up finding out who the agent is and who their clients are, and then you find out through one of those offers, you know exactly what their max is. What happens when you're up against them on the next offer? Right. Or the next offer after that? Like, we shouldn't be knowing each other's maximum price values and mortgage pre-approval amounts.
Well, Windsor's a small city.
Exactly.
Windsor's a small city. I mean, there might be some, in this pilot project, there might be some like bidder 1, bidder 2. We don't know the name of the person, that kind of thing, right? And I actually would think that's probably the way that they're going to do it. But my other concern is, I was talking to an agent, I'm not going to say who, this morning, and I haven't looked into this 100% on how this pilot project is going to be run. But I do believe that sellers are going to have the option to sell the way it's been or to sell under this pilot project. And I don't know which one's more in favor for the seller, and we'll see which one starts to catch on. But it's not like this is going to be on every house. This is if they elect to do this particular style of bidding. And then what I heard today is whoever is the highest offer doesn't win. It's not over. So there's a bidding process, and it's just like an eBay where it's like click, 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 click. Everybody goes up, and whoever ends up winning, there's a timeline on that, and then the real negotiation starts. So because the highest offer on all the bids may not be what the seller's willing to take.
Sure.
So what happens is that moves over to the negotiating table, and then the seller can still counter higher. And then they can start the negotiation from there.
Because the bottom line is you can't tell a seller what to sell their house for.
Right.
You can't tell them, that just because you have an offer on the table, you have to let this go.
So there's still negotiating that's going to happen. So just because this project is allowing open bidding, whoever ends up having the highest bid still has to go to the table and negotiate it out. The terms, conditions, closing deposits.
Right.
Whatever it might be. I'm interested to see how it plays out. I know the only country that seems to have adapted this is, I believe, Australia. And that's the only one that seems to have taken on somewhat. But I don't know if
what I've read is that Australia and New Zealand, who I think were both doing some style of this, their prices were increasing faster than they were here.
I'm looking that up. Australian real estate growth.
I mean, again, it will just be adapting to a new style of doing things. I don't want people out there to think that this is some magic bullet that's gonna fix, what's happening with prices out there, because the bottom line is what's really happening with prices out there is that we have way more buyers than there are houses to satisfy. And this supply issue is what's causing these prices to go up. No matter it's supply and demand 101. If you've got 10 houses and you've got 100 buyers that are fighting for those 10 houses, they're going to continue to fight each other until the prices increase, because that's the way it works. When you have an in-demand product, the prices go higher, right? And really nobody is controlling that. We don't as realtors pick what something ultimately is going to sell for. Right. We don't pick. If you're the listing agent, no matter whether you list the house low in a seller's market to draw in more people to view the home, or it's a buyer's market and you list high because you know that somebody's going to come in and try to negotiate you down, it doesn't matter where you price that home, usually relative to where it's actually going to sell. It may take you longer or shorter to sell. You may have a tougher time selling your house if you price it incorrectly. But ultimately, if we're doing our job properly, we're able to find out what the value of that home in a range is in that neighborhood for that style of home. And that's around where it's going to sell, right? And if the demand is high and those numbers get pushed higher and higher and higher because people are fighting for these properties, then we use that data set to determine what the value of the next house that's going to sell in those areas are. That's what we're doing. We're not just picking numbers out of the air and deciding, hey, you know what, go spend $1 million on this property. I only think it's worth $700,000. Well, I would never do that. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to look at that neighborhood and go, look, I mean, yes, I know it's listed for $799, but look, all the houses in this area are selling for $950, $960, $970. We have a pretty darn good idea that that's what this house is going to be worth. So that's what we base our bid on. We're not just picking a number from the sky, and we're not, quote, overpaying by $200,000. Yeah. We know that listing price is not the market value of that home.
If we were in an old school strategy that was used 7 years ago and on, a house 970 would have been listed around $1 million and left room to negotiate down. And I always say to buyers or even parents that are watching what their kids are doing in the market, if I had a house for you at $1 million and said I can get it for you for $950, you'd say that's great. I $50,000 off the asking price. But if I said I have an $800,000 home and you have to go to $950, they're gonna be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" But in the end, it's still the same house for the same price. It's just the way you're interpreting it.
Yeah, well, and it's
the way it perceives.
It changes with the type of market that we're in, and that's what people really, I don't think they grasp it, because when you're not in the real estate industry, you don't really know the terms, and we try to educate people on those terms. We are in a seller's market. That means there is very few homes on the market compared to the number of buyers that there are out there that want those homes. In that old school market that you just talked about, that would be a buyer's market. That means there's way more houses on the market.
You have to leave yourself room to negotiate.
There are buyers out there for those houses. So yeah, you use the opposite strategy. You price it high because you know when you have somebody that comes in that is actually interested in writing an offer, they're going to want to knock that price down. So you're still marketing your house to try to get the value that you want, the value that the market says your house is worth. You're just using a different strategy to get there. Yeah. Right?
I found an article on Australia. The ultimate reason real estate in Australia is so expensive. Most Australians believe that homes are the ultimate rock-solid investment. We've had 25 straight years of economic growth here in Australia. So everybody thinks that, and this is on an open bidding system. So everybody thinks open bidding is going to help anything. Well, Australia just had 25 years of economic growth in real estate. There's the lunacy of the Aussie real estate market today shows housing in a rocket about to explode. And then there was one other note in here that I wanted to bring up. They believe the current insane home prices are fully justified. Anyways, it looks like they're breaking records just as fast. There was something here about the last 15 months.
It's not a fix. I want people to understand that. Like, getting rid of blind bidding here.
They're up 40%. They're up 40% in the last. Up 40% in the last year was in this article. So
40%.
They're up 40%. That's no different than where we're at here.
Well, it's more.
Right. So.
Right. You think that that's some silver bullet that's going to come tame this market, but we're not. Look, and the problems are not easily addressable. That's the issue, and I think that's. It's the government looking for ways to sort of appease the masses and try to figure out how can we get people to calm down a little bit in this highly volatile scenario that we're all in now because of the pandemic and politics and all this other stuff going on. But, ultimately the issues that we need to address are one of supply and one of development and less red tape on developments and more densification. And, maybe that means that we're going to see more condos in cities, even like Windsor, not just in places like the GTA, townhomes,
denser living.
Yeah, like we're
denser
living up, right?
Yeah.
Like building
we got a lot of jobs
6 to 9
in
story,
immigration.
Condo building where, yes, maybe you're only getting 600 or 700 square feet for, what you used to be able to buy a nice detached home for. But guess what? That's the reality of living in these cities, especially in Southern Ontario, where it's a desirable place to live. There's going to constantly be immigration coming in here. There's constantly going to be growth, and people want to live in these areas, which is going to continue to push that demand. And if that demand is high and the supply isn't meeting that demand, it doesn't matter what you do with the bidding. It doesn't matter what you do with the small policies and the small things that are changing. What matters is we need to keep up with that supply in different ways to satisfy that. And you know what? This isn't a new issue. Like, I've talked to clients. I talked to some older clients of mine that sold their house with me a couple months ago, and they told me their story of what it was like for them to get into the real estate market. This was 30 some years ago, and they moved into a mobile home. There, even back then, in the 70s and 80s, for them to get into the housing market, they didn't have their eyes set on the beautiful, 3+1 bedroom, 3 bathroom brick ranch in a beautiful neighborhood right off the bat, because that was unattainable. They said, how are we going to get ourselves into this market? What are our options available to us now? Can we get into a small condo? Can we get into a mobile home in one of these land lease parks? Can I buy a home with a friend? Can I, buy a home with a sibling? Will my parents help me? All these things, they're not new, but I think they're more important than ever now, because we have to be creative how we get into the market. But the most important thing is get into the market.
I was saying we are very passionate about a lot of the things that are being said.
We speak passionately. You can tell that these are issues.
We really do give a shit. We give a shit about our clients. We are your realtors for life. Like, we live passionately by that. And anybody who's ever bought or sold a house with us can testify and basically speak on our behalf that we really go in and work hard to make sure we get houses for the proper prices for our clients. We work hard to make sure that the houses are inspected. We work hard to make sure that they get the right home, the right investment, whether it's resale, long-term.
We work with the proper mortgage professionals to make sure that they're protected from a financial standpoint.
When I'm selling your home, whether you like this market or not, I'm going to do the strategy that makes my client the most money. I'm not going to do the strategy that's the best for the buyers. I'm not going to do the strategy that's best for the economy. I'm going to do the strategy that's going to make my sellers the most money. That's my job.
That's why they're hiring.
That's my job. I understand people don't like the prices that we're seeing. But this is not us. It's supply and demand, and it's happening everywhere. I'm not going to go to my seller and say, I'm going to sell your home, but we're going to use this strategy because I don't want you to make the most money, because I don't want this market to continue to grow. I obviously have to do what's going to do the best result for my seller. Now on the buying end, I hate it. I hate the fuck out of it. Like, I can't stand the market that we're in, because we were just saying, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I could enjoy a weekend. I could pick up a coffee with my clients. We could go to 20 houses over the weekend, have fun doing it. We didn't have to stress about multiple offers, who's writing on this, how much more over asking. We could pick any house that we like, negotiate out a price, put normal conditions in, go in and do a proper deal, and it was done. That was easier for us. It was easier for our buyers, and it was more fun. We don't like this market as much as anybody else. I'm happy for the sellers. I'm happy that anybody who owns a home is doing really well and they're making good money. That's great for them. But on the buying side, I hate it just as much as everybody else. And I passionately want to express my thoughts on the fact that I am here to make sure our buyers get the best investment they can, but we're also navigating this through just like everybody else. And I hate when I read these articles that agents are blowing up these prices. No, listen, I have sisters that are trying to get into the real estate market. I have a brother who's trying to get in the real estate market. I have friends trying to get into the real estate market. I have clients that I deeply care about trying to get in the real estate market. We're servicing them, running around for 6 months trying to find them a home. I don't want this to be happening. No. Now, for the sellers, this is great. I get it. It's a good time right now to be a seller. That's just the market we're in. It's not the agents. It's just supply and demand.
But often those sellers are on the buying side, on one side of the transaction as well. So they don't get off scot-free from this market.
Right.
Like they have to go and play the same game on the other side of it.
Right.
Selling is easy, buying is hard. Now in an opposite market, where you've got all these houses to choose from, the buying side, like you just mentioned, you could go out, you could see 20 houses. It was fun. You could pick whatever you wanted. From a first-time home buyer perspective, that's awesome. But when you're also selling your home in that market, you might take 90 to 120 days to sell your home for a price that even makes sense to you at all. So again, there's no magic perfectly balanced utopian market here where you're going to be able to sell your home for a price that you think is fair and that you want, and immediately go out and find a beautiful home and have no stress involved in that situation.
That's a good point, because in a market that is in favor of the buyers, there's more options for sellers where they, as far as they can sell their home, like you said, it might take them 120 days, 90 days, whatever it is. But once it's sold, they're not stressing about having to find a home. That's the easier part in that market. Selling the home is the harder part. So that's typically the market when you start to see house to sell conditions.
Yep.
So that's nice. They can either decide to sell first, give themselves a long closing, go find a home, or they could put a house to sell condition in there. Today, house to sell conditions don't exist. So sellers really only have one option, and that's to buy first, because selling is not the issue right now. It's buying. But the problem is, if all of our listings that we're supposed to have on market right now are not, because they're all trying to find a home, well, then everybody is being held hostage by this market. So our sellers are all ready, locked and loaded to put their houses on the market, but none of them are going to put their houses on the market until they find a home. But if there's no homes because none of the sellers are putting their houses on market, we're in this crazy cycle. And this is the issue we're having. Yeah. It's not the realtors. It's not the banks. It's yes, interest rates were lower, and there's a lot of people looking to get into the real estate game, and it's just the supply and demand issue. I don't know else how to fix it. I think the rising interest rates are going to help simmer things off. I think that's a good move. I think the time of year is right for the rising interest rates, because we're coming into a spring market where naturally more houses will hit the market. But I think this is just a short-term effect that we're going to feel in a long-term problem that we're going to continue to have, I think.
I agree. I think we're sort of behind the eight ball in the sense that the government hasn't kept up with supplying adequate housing levels for the amount of people that we have in this country and the amount of people coming into the country every year and the growth that we're experiencing. So it's a big game of catch up that we're trying to play here. And I don't know that we can. I don't know that there's a fast enough track that we can play. What they're trying to do is I guess soften the demand a little bit so that we have time to catch up but again, there's no magic fix for this. There's not going to be some big reveal that happens in the next couple of years.
And our team meets about this on a regular basis because we're trying to figure out where is this going, what can we do for our clients, because like I said, it's great for the sellers, but there's not that many sellers. So we're on the majority side of things, dealing with the buyers. Like most agents out there are dealing with more buyers than there are sellers. So most of us are struggling more. Like I personally think 10 years ago was a better market for realtors.
Well, yeah. I mean, agents that have been in this market for decades. Yeah. That have, the referral base and the repeat clients that have bought and sold with them several times in the past. They're the majority of the people that are holding the listings in this market, right? Because they have a 30-year reputation, a 20-year reputation, whatever it is. And they've got those repeat, second, third, fourth time clients that are trusting them to sell their homes with them. And
4 generations worth of referrals.
Right. And then you've got all these,
new agents,
newer agents, and I even say newer agents all the way up until probably like 6 or 7 years, where you don't have that full referral base, and the majority of us are working with the buyers, and there's a lot of buyers out there to work with, and this market is not fun for those buyers. Right. It's not fun for us. It's not fun when we've got clients that we've been working with for over a year. Yeah. And we're, running around all over the county, showing houses for over a year, putting in offers, getting disappointed, trying our best to get these people in the market. All the while they're losing purchasing power. And, it's not like we're making nothing in that, period of time. So it's not fun. Like, it's not like we're just all laughing our way to the bank here. It doesn't work that way. And really the main thing that makes me lose sleep at night is helping people achieve their goals before it's too late. Right? Because I've got clients that are on the edge of not being able to afford.
And like I said, I'm going to play the clip that we had from only 2 or 3 months ago. And what you just said there, we're finally coming into a time for the next maybe 3 or 4 months here that I think people are going to be scared into thinking that this market's going to take a deep dive. And there's going to be a lot of articles because of these rising interest rates. And because we're just coming into a normal, typical spring season where there's a lot of product. So I actually think we're going to come into a market that's more favorable to buyers than it has been over the last few months. And a lot of buyers are going to take a step back.
Well, that's the scary.
They're going to take a step back because they're going to think that they shouldn't be buying right now. But in the long term, I think they're going to look back and think that they should have maybe thought about buying. So to go into what you're saying and you losing sleep into what's better for the long term, or looking in what's better for the buyers, and finding them something before it's too late. I want to shake the buyers that are taking a break right now and be like, no, come back, because right now is actually when you want to be looking.
And you know what? I guess one of the tough things that people don't often think about when they're in that position too is what is low enough for you? Like if the market were to drop by 5% over the next 6 months, is that low enough for you? Or are you going to go, oh no, the market's on a downward trend, I'm going to wait until it's even cheaper than that? And then what happens when it doesn't bottom out where you think it's going to bottom out, and all of a sudden it's 10% higher? It's like you're trying to time the stock market. It would be like trying to time a stock that's in a dip. Right. That a stock that falls and go, okay, now's the time to buy, but maybe I shouldn't buy because it might fall even further than this. So you wait, and then a week later, that stock is through the roof. Timing the market, you might get lucky. Yeah. You might get lucky, but at the end of the day, you're not going to end up winning.
I think our next podcast, let's say next week. Let's aim for next week. Let's do it live on Facebook. I want to hear people's opinions. I want to hear people chime in and ask questions, because there's a lot of conflicting views on this based on people's experiences or based on their view from their vantage point. They have to remember they have a lot of people have a narrow vantage point from social media and where they stand. When we're sitting completely engulfed in this industry, we see every vantage point, right? And we know what the reason certain things are happening or why something's happening. And it's hard to explain when somebody has a narrow vantage point from a social media view. So I'd love to have like a Q&A, almost debate session where people can ask questions and we can try and overcome some of these perceptions that people have. And some people we may not win or ever get through to. But I would love to do maybe like a Facebook Live type thing. One thing I want to point out really quick before we finish up is they are now allowing building permits to be applied for online. That just was announced, I believe, this week. So they're going to be able to apply for building permits through an online portal that will speed things up so that we're not delayed on building. So that's big. I do love that the Canadian government is trying to come up with ways to help the real estate market. But at the same time, I also think trying too many things is possibly going to make things worse or hurt it. You have to let markets play and kind of play through their cycles and play the course. I don't think trying to implement too many things is always wise, because you're solving one problem but creating three more. So I'm interested to see what some of these pilot projects do. I'm glad it's a pilot project and not a permanent fixture to the real estate business. These are all cool things. I mean, I love to see at least what the results are. I mean, maybe it will help buyers. I don't see it. But overall, I think in the coming weeks, we'll have a better idea of actually how this is trending, and we may look back at this and realize we were wrong. But I think this is typical, and I think we have a lot of data and statistics to back up what we're seeing right now. And I'm not we're not surprised by this. We kind of predicted this to happen.
We put out educated opinions, right? That's what we're doing. We're taking all the information in, and we're giving you an educated opinion as a professional. This is our job. We're not just winging it. We're not here just, shooting out numbers for the fun of it and telling you.
We sell hundreds of houses a year.
This is a very educated opinion that you're hearing from us. Other people definitely hold other opinions, and listen, we completely respect those opinions, but just be very careful what you're basing your total view on this from, because social media is oftentimes not your friend. You really have to evaluate.
It's very negative usually.
Yeah, you have to really evaluate where you're getting your information from, and comment sections are sometimes the worst place to be. They'll just fuel negativity, and just remember that we're here as professionals
to try and solve these problems,
to solve the problems and help and guide. And I wish that we could make a stronger impact with what we're doing, that would have great change. But unfortunately, we're bound by the same things that everyone else is in this world, in this industry. We can't magically, give people a house for much cheaper. It's just not the way that it works. We work off of data and value and predictions and
sellers' needs
and buyers' wants and needs and timelines. And real estate is not just a completely linear thing. Remember, everything in this industry is based on a multitude of other factors. Timing, like how fast a seller needs to sell their home versus somebody that doesn't need to sell for 5 months. Yeah, the debts that they're in, how fast somebody moving from the city for a new job from another city, how quickly they need to be in a house, and versus how much they're willing to pay for that house. There is no A and B and that's it. There's A to Z and every choice in between of how a house sells and why it sells for what it sells for.
B flat, B sharp.
Right, yeah. So again, there's so many different factors involved, and we are literally the professionals here trying to make sure that we help you navigate through those experiences.
But because we're in the front lines, everybody chooses to point the finger at us.
Well, it's not just us. People are pointing the fingers at lawyers, and people are pointing the fingers at banks, and people
Right.
are pointing their fingers at the government, and
Mm-hmm.
and I get it. What it's showing is that people are frustrated. People are very visually and audibly frustrated with rising prices and inflation and wars going on in the world, and the way that politics are happening. But
And those gas prices.
yeah, right. And yeah, unfortunately, there's always going to be things to complain about. We don't live in a perfect society, but I remind everybody here in Canada, we do live in a pretty damn good country. Regardless of how you want to see it, we are very lucky to live where we live, and we just have to sort of do our best to try to live the life that we want to live, and in real estate, at least, we're here to help people do that.